The bullet grazed so close to Rebecca's cheek that she felt the heat of it before she heard the gunshot. And in that instant, she understood her husband was never coming home alive. She stood frozen in the doorway of their modest ranch house outside San Andreas, California, watching riders disappear into the dust of the horizon. Their laughter carried back on the wind like poisoned whispers. Thomas lay in the dirt yard, his blood seeping into the earth he had worked so hard to tame. She wanted to scream, to run to him, but her body refused to obey. The shock wrapped around her like iron chains. It was their neighbor, old Martin Fletcher, who finally moved her, gently steering her back inside while his wife went to Thomas. Rebecca heard the woman's soft crying and knew without being told that her husband of 3 years was gone. She was 22 years old and a widow in the spring of 1878. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of grief and cold reality. The ranch needed work. The cattle needed tending. The debts needed paying. Thomas had been a dreamer, always talking about the fortune they would make, the empire they would build together in California's wild interior. But dreams did not pay creditors, and Rebecca found herself staring down a mountain of obligations with empty pockets and an emptier heart. She tried. Lord knows she tried. She rose before dawn and worked until her hands bled. She mended fences, fed livestock, hauled water from the creek. But one woman alone could not do the work of 3 men, and slowly, inevitably, everything began to fall apart. The men who came to collect the debts were not kind. They looked at her with calculating eyes that made her skin crawl. One suggested she might work off what was owed in ways that made her reach for Thomas's rifle. They left, but their words lingered like smoke. By autumn, Rebecca had sold most of the cattle and half the land just to keep the roof over her head. She had become a ghost of herself, thin and hard and suspicious of every shadow. When men spoke to her in town, she heard only lies. When they offered help, she saw only traps. Trust had died with Thomas in that dusty yard, and she had buried it just as deep. The winter of 1878 came early and harsh. Rebecca worked odd jobs in San Andreas, mending clothes, cleaning houses, anything to earn a few coins. The other women were kind enough, though she saw pity in their eyes and hated it. She did not want pity. She wanted to go back in time and warn Thomas about the men who came that day, the ones with grudges over some foolish card game disagreement. It was during a particularly brutal February snowstorm that Rebecca's horse threw a shoe 3 miles outside of town. She was leading the mare along the frozen road, her thin coat doing little against the wind, when a rider appeared through the swirling white. "Madam, you should not be out in this weather," the man said, his voice deep and steady. Rebecca looked up at him with automatic distrust. He was tall in the saddle, with dark hair visible beneath his hat, and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were a surprising blue-green like shallow ocean water. "I can manage," she said curtly, turning away. "Your horse needs shoeing and you are half frozen," he continued, bringing his mount alongside her. "The Turner Ranch is just over that ridge. I work there. You can warm up and I will see to your mare." "I said I can manage." "I am sure you can, madam, but that does not mean you should have to." Something in his tone made her pause. There was no condescension, no hidden meaning. He spoke to her as one person to another, nothing more. Still, she hesitated. "My name is Lucas Xavier," he said when she did not respond. "I have been foreman at the Turner place for 2 years now. You can ask anyone in San Andreas about me. I mean you no harm. I am just offering shelter from a storm." The wind chose that moment to gust so hard it nearly knocked Rebecca off her feet. Lucas dismounted smoothly and steadied her with a hand on her elbow. She flinched but did not pull away. "Please," he said simply. That single word, spoken without demand or expectation, cracked something in her armor. She was so cold she could barely feel her feet, and the storm was worsening. Common sense warred with fear, and for once, sense won. "All right," she said quietly. Lucas led both horses, leaving Rebecca to walk beside him rather than making her feel obligated by riding while she was afoot. It was a small thing, but she noticed. They crested the ridge and she saw the sprawling Turner Ranch below, lights glowing warm against the white darkness. The ranch house was large and well-maintained. Lucas took her straight to the kitchen door, where a plump woman with kind eyes immediately swept Rebecca inside, clucking over her frozen state. Lucas disappeared with the horses while the woman, who introduced herself as Martha Turner, the rancher's wife, plied Rebecca with hot coffee and blankets. "You are Thomas Barrett's widow," Martha said gently. "I am so sorry for your loss. He was a good man." Rebecca nodded, the familiar ache settling in her chest. She had learned to carry it like a stone, heavy but manageable if she did not examine it too closely. Lucas returned 20 minutes later, brushing snow from his shoulders. "Your mare is in the stable, warm and fed. I will shoe her in the morning when the storm passes. You should stay the night. The roads are not safe." Rebecca wanted to refuse, but Martha was already showing her to a small guest room, and the thought of going back out into that howling wind made her bones ache. She thanked them stiffly and retreated to the room, locking the door and pushing a chair against it for good measure. In the morning, she woke to sunshine and the smell of bacon. She emerged cautiously to find Martha cooking and Lucas already gone to tend the animals. Over breakfast, Martha talked easily about the ranch, her 3 grown children who had moved to San Francisco, and how much she appreciated Lucas's help. "He came through here 2 years ago looking for work," Martha said. "Best decision we ever made, hiring him. He is honest as the day is long and works harder than any 2 men combined. Never complains, never causes trouble. We would be lost without him." Rebecca listened but said little. When Lucas appeared to tell her the horse was ready, she thanked Martha for the hospitality and prepared to leave. Lucas walked her to the stable where her mare stood contentedly munching hay, her hoof newly shod. "What do I owe you?" Rebecca asked, reaching for her small coin purse. "Nothing," Lucas said. "It was no trouble. I pay my debts. It is not a debt, it is just one person helping another." She looked at him sharply, searching for the angle, the expectation. But his expression was open and honest, his hands busy checking her saddle to make sure it was secure. "I do not accept charity," she said firmly. "Then consider it neighborly kindness," Lucas replied. "When you are in a position to help someone else, you can pass it along. That is payment enough." Rebecca wanted to argue, but she was not sure what to say to that. She mounted her horse, looking down at him. "Thank you," she said finally, the words feeling rusty in her mouth. "You are welcome, Mrs. Barrett. Safe travels." She rode away feeling unsettled. Men did not help for nothing. There was always a price, always an expectation. She would wait and see what Lucas Xavier truly wanted, but weeks passed and she did not see him again. Spring began to creep into the valley, melting the snow and turning the hills green. Rebecca continued her exhausting routine of work and survival, always one disaster away from losing everything. Then her well went bad. She spent a whole day hauling water from the creek, knowing it was not sustainable. She needed the well dug deeper or needed to find the source of the contamination. Either option required money or skills she did not possess. She stood in her yard at sunset, staring at the useless well, and felt despair creeping in. The next morning, she woke to the sound of digging. Rebecca grabbed Thomas's rifle and ran outside in her nightgown and robe to find Lucas Xavier in her yard, already waist deep in widening her well. "What are you doing?" she demanded, the rifle not quite pointed at him but not lowered either. Lucas looked up, seemingly unbothered by the weapon. "Morning, Mrs. Barrett. Your well is contaminated. I am fixing it." "I did not ask you to do that. I know. I was riding past and saw you hauling water yesterday. Figured you could use a hand." "You were riding past," she repeated flatly. "The Turner Ranch has business in San Andreas regularly. This is the main road." It was true, but that did not explain why he had stopped, why he was currently covered in mud and digging in her yard without being asked. "I cannot pay you," she said, hating the admission. "Did I ask for payment? You should be asking. Nobody works for free." Lucas climbed out of the well, wiping his hands on his already filthy trousers. He looked at her directly, and she saw nothing but sincerity in those blue-green eyes. "Mrs. Barrett, you have been through a terrible loss, and you are trying to keep this place running alone. That is admirable, but it is also near impossible. I have time today and the skills to help. That is all this is. When I am done, I will leave. You do not owe me anything except maybe to let me finish before the sun gets too high." Rebecca did not know what to say to that. She stood there in her night clothes, holding a rifle on a man who was trying to help her, and felt foolish. Slowly, she lowered the weapon. "I will make coffee," she said, because she had to say something. "That would be appreciated," Lucas said with a small smile and returned to his digging. Rebecca went inside, her mind spinning. She dressed properly and made coffee, then brought a cup out to Lucas along with some bread and cheese left over from her meager breakfast. He accepted both gratefully, taking a break in the shade of her porch. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, unable to help herself. Lucas took a long drink of coffee before answering. "I grew up on a ranch in Montana," he said. "When I was 14, my father died in a stampede. My mother tried to keep the place going, but it was too much for her alone. We lost everything. I watched her work herself to exhaustion, watched her pride keep her from accepting help until it was too late. I swore then that if I ever saw someone in a similar situation, I would help if I could. Not for payment or recognition, just because it is the right thing to do." The honesty in his words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She saw his past in his eyes, the old pain that matched her own. "I am sorry about your father," she said quietly. "And I am sorry about your husband," Lucas replied. "Grief is a heavy burden, so is pride. But sometimes accepting help is not weakness. It is just wisdom." He returned to work after that, and Rebecca found herself watching him from the kitchen window as she went about her own chores. He worked steadily, efficiently, and by late afternoon he had found the source of the contamination, a collapsed section of the well wall that was allowing runoff to seep in. He repaired it with stones from her property, reinforcing the entire structure. When he finally declared it finished, he pumped fresh water and they both watched it run clear. "Give it until tomorrow to be sure," Lucas said, "but it should be good now." "Thank you," Rebecca said, and this time the words came easier. "This would have cost me dearly to hire someone." "You are welcome," Lucas said. He collected his tools and headed for his horse. "Wait," Rebecca said impulsively. "You should clean up. You are covered in mud. I can heat water for washing." Lucas looked surprised but nodded. "That would be kind of you." She heated water on the stove and showed him to the wash basin on the back porch, providing a clean towel and a bar of soap. While he washed, she found herself preparing a proper meal, more than she had cooked for just herself in months. By the time Lucas emerged, cleaner though still damp, she had fried salt pork, beans, and the last of her bread set out on the table. "You do not have to feed me," Lucas said. "You worked all day in my well. It is the least I can do." They sat across from each other at her small table, and Rebecca tried to remember the last time she had shared a meal with anyone. The silence was awkward at first, but Lucas began to talk easily about the Turner Ranch, about the wild mustangs that had been spotted in the northern hills, about the strange weather patterns this spring. He did not pry into her life or ask uncomfortable questions. He just talked, and slowly, Rebecca found herself responding. She told him about the struggle to keep the ranch going, about the debt still hanging over her. She did not mention Thomas much, the wound still too raw, but Lucas seemed to understand her silence on that front. When the meal was finished and the sun was setting, Lucas finally rose to leave. "Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Barrett. It was the best meal I have had in quite some time." "Thank you for the well," Rebecca replied. "And please call me Rebecca. Mrs. Barrett makes me feel older than I am." "Rebecca, then. And you can call me Lucas." She nodded, and for the first time in months she felt something other than suspicion when looking at a man. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. Over the following weeks, Lucas became a semi-regular presence. He never imposed, never showed up unannounced except that first time, but he found reasons to stop by. He was heading to town, and did she need anything? He had extra fence posts from a project at the Turner place. Could she use them? One of the ranch hands had caught more fish than they could eat. Would she like some? Each time, Rebecca's defenses wavered a little more. Lucas never asked for anything in return. He never made her feel obligated. He just helped in small ways and large, and then went about his business. One day in late April, Rebecca was struggling to move a fallen tree that was blocking the path to her grazing land. She had been sawing at it for hours, making little progress when Lucas rode up. "Need a hand?" he asked. By now, she had learned that refusing was pointless. "If you are offering." Together, they sawed the tree into manageable sections and cleared the path in under an hour, work that would have taken Rebecca days on her own. When they finished, she invited him to sit on the porch and share the water she had drawn from her now functioning well. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said as they sat in the shade. "Of course." "Why are you not married? A man like you, stable, hard-working. I would think women would be lining up." Lucas smiled slightly. "I was engaged once, back in Montana. She decided she wanted a man with more money and better prospects. Married a banker from Helena. I learned that some people love what you can give them more than they love you. Made me cautious, I suppose." "So you understand," Rebecca said softly. "I understand that trust is earned, not given freely. And I understand that once it is broken, it is hard to mend." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the birds and the rustle of wind through the new leaves. "I should go," Lucas said eventually. "But if you need anything, you know where to find me." "I do," Rebecca said. "Lucas, thank you for everything." "You are welcome, Rebecca." As spring turned to summer, their friendship deepened. Lucas taught Rebecca how to repair her own fences, how to read the signs of illness in cattle, how to manage the ranch more efficiently. He never made her feel stupid for not knowing, never acted superior. He just shared his knowledge freely and praised her when she learned quickly. For her part, Rebecca began to cook meals on the days Lucas visited, finding satisfaction in seeing him enjoy her food. She mended a tear in his coat without being asked, and when he protested, she reminded him of his own words about passing kindness along. But more than the practical help, Rebecca found herself enjoying Lucas's company. He made her laugh with stories about mishaps at the Turner Ranch. He listened when she talked about her dreams for her land, never dismissing them as foolish. Slowly, the walls around her heart began to crack. It was not a sudden realization, but a gradual awakening. She noticed how her heart lifted when she saw him riding up the path. She found herself thinking about conversations they had had, smiling at remembered jokes. She took more care with her appearance on days she thought he might visit, then felt foolish for it. but trust was still hard. There were days when old fears crept in, when she wondered what Lucas really wanted, when she caught herself looking for the trap she was sure existed. On those days, she was cool and distant, and Lucas never pushed. He just accepted her moods and continued to treat her with the same steady kindness. One evening in July, a group of drifters came by Rebecca's ranch asking for water and food. She had learned to be wary of strangers and told them she had nothing to spare. The men were not pleased, their leader making veiled threats about what could happen to a woman alone. Rebecca fetched the rifle, her hand steady despite her racing heart. The men left, but not before the leader promised they would be back. She did not sleep that night, sitting up with the rifle across her lap, starting at every sound. By morning, she was exhausted and terrified. She knew she could not defend the ranch alone if those men returned with serious intent. Pride warred with practicality, and practicality won. She saddled her horse and rode to the Turner Ranch. Lucas was working with a young colt in the corral when she arrived. He took one look at her face and handed the horse off to another ranch hand. "What happened?" he asked, leading her away from curious ears. Rebecca told him about the drifters, hating how her voice shook. Lucas's expression darkened. "You should have come here last night. You should not have been alone. I can take care of myself." "I know you can, Rebecca, but you should not have to. Not against men like that." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I will stay at your place for a few days, sleep in the barn. If they come back, they will see you are not alone." "I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking, I am offering. Let me do this, please." Rebecca wanted to refuse, but the thought of another sleepless night filled with fear made her nod. "All right, thank you." Lucas gathered his things and followed her back to her ranch. He set himself up in the barn with his bedroll, and Rebecca felt safer than she had in months knowing he was there. The drifters did come back, 2 nights later. Rebecca heard the horses and was reaching for her rifle when Lucas emerged from the barn, his own weapon in hand. The sight of a tall, armed man changed the dynamic immediately. The drifters muttered among themselves and rode off without confrontation. Lucas stayed for a week total, until he was satisfied the threat had passed. During that time, they fell into an easy routine. Rebecca cooked, Lucas helped with evening chores, and they spent the twilight hours talking on the porch. She learned about his childhood in Montana, about his mother who had eventually remarried a kind store owner and was now happy in Billings. He learned about her family back east, who had disowned her for marrying Thomas and moving west, about her dreams of making the ranch successful and proving them all wrong. On his last evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Lucas turned to her. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something." Her heart clenched. Here it was, the price, the expectation she had been waiting for. "I have feelings for you," Lucas said quietly. "I have tried not to, told myself it was too soon for you, that you were not ready. But I cannot spend this much time with you and not feel what I feel. You are strong and brave and kind, and being with you makes me happier than I have been in years." Rebecca stared at him, her mind reeling. "I am not asking you to feel the same way," Lucas continued. "I know you are still grieving, still learning to trust again. I just wanted to be honest with you. It does not change anything. I will still be your friend, still help when you need it, no strings attached. But I needed you to know." "I do not know what to say," Rebecca whispered. "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that you are cared for, that you are valued, not for what you can give, but for who you are." He stood then, preparing to head to the barn for the night. Rebecca found herself standing too, her hand reaching out to catch his arm. "Lucas, wait." He turned back, patient and open as always. "I feel something too," she admitted, the words difficult but necessary. "I am scared of it. I am scared of trusting again, of opening my heart and having it destroyed. Thomas and we were happy, and then he was just gone. Those men took him from me like he meant nothing, and I cannot stop thinking about how much it hurt. I do not know if I can survive that kind of pain again." Lucas covered her hand with his own, warm and solid. "I cannot promise that life will not bring more pain. Nobody can promise that. But I can promise that I will never willingly hurt you. I can promise that every day I will work to earn and keep your trust. I can promise that your heart is safe with me, Rebecca. As safe as I can make it." Tears slipped down her cheeks, the first she had allowed herself in months. "How can you be so patient with me, so kind? I have been nothing but suspicious and difficult." "You have been protecting yourself," Lucas said gently, brushing away her tears with his thumb. "That is not difficult. That is survival, and I am patient because you are worth the patience. However long it takes, I will be here." Rebecca stepped closer, and Lucas wrapped his arms around her. She pressed her face against his chest and let herself cry, really cry, for the first time since Thomas died. Lucas held her through it all, his hand stroking her hair, his heart beating steady beneath her ear. When the tears finally subsided, she looked up at him. "I am not ready for everything, not yet, but I want to try. I want to see where this could go." "Then that is what we will do," Lucas said. "We will take it slow. We will take it at your pace. There is no rush." That night, Lucas returned to the barn, but something fundamental had shifted between them. The next morning, when he prepared to go back to the Turner ranch, he kissed her forehead gently, a promise and a question all at once. Over the following months, Lucas courted Rebecca with a patience and care that slowly eroded her fears. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, not because it was expected, but because he thought she would like them. He fixed things around her ranch without being asked, but he also taught her how to fix them herself, never assuming she was helpless. He talked to her about his dreams, his thoughts, his fears, showing her his own vulnerability. In August, they went to a barn dance in San Andreas together. It was Rebecca's first social event since Thomas died, and she was nervous. But Lucas stayed by her side, his presence steady and reassuring. When he asked her to dance, she hesitated only a moment before accepting. His hand was warm on her waist, his other hand gentle as it held hers. They moved together to the fiddle music, and Rebecca felt something she had thought lost forever. Joy, pure, simple joy. "You are beautiful when you smile," Lucas said softly. "I have not had much reason to smile lately. Then I will just have to give you more reasons." As autumn arrived, painting the California hills in gold and brown, Rebecca realized she was falling in love. It terrified her, but it also felt right in a way she could not explain. Lucas had proven himself in 1,000 small ways, never pushing, never demanding, just consistently showing up and caring for her. One October evening, as they sat on her porch watching the stars emerge, Rebecca reached over and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. "I love you," she said quietly. "I did not think I would ever say those words again, but I love you, Lucas Xavier." Lucas turned to her, his eyes shining in the starlight. "I love you too, Rebecca. I have loved you for months now. You have made me believe in second chances." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Rebecca felt the last of her walls crumble. This was different from what she had with Thomas. Not better or worse, just different. Thomas had been young love, passionate and idealistic. Lucas was deeper, steadier, built on friendship and trust and truly seeing each other. "Will you marry me?" Lucas asked, still holding her close. "I know it might seem too soon, but I am certain of what I feel. I want to build a life with you, Rebecca. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to help you make this ranch everything you dreamed it could be. I want to be your partner in all things." Rebecca felt tears rising again, but these were different. These were tears of happiness, of hope, of a future she had thought impossible. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They married in November of 1879, a small ceremony in San Andreas with the Turners and a few other friends as witnesses. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress, and Lucas wore his best clothes, cleaned and pressed. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed her with a reverence that made her feel cherished beyond measure. They moved Lucas's belongings to Rebecca's ranch, which became their ranch. Lucas continued to work for the Turners, but now he came home to Rebecca every night. They worked the land together, building it up slowly but surely. Lucas's steady income and Rebecca's careful management meant the debts were finally paid off by spring. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. They had disagreements about how to manage the ranch, about money, about 100 small things. But they had built their relationship on communication and trust, and they worked through each issue together. Lucas never dismissed Rebecca's opinions, and she learned to accept help without seeing it as a threat to her independence. In the summer of 1880, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. Lucas was overjoyed, already planning improvements to the house to make room for a nursery. "What if something happens?" Rebecca asked him one night, her hand on her still flat stomach. "What if I lose you like I lost Thomas? What if our child grows up without a father?" Lucas pulled her close. "We cannot live in fear of what might happen, my love. All we can do is cherish each day we have together and build the best life we can. I am careful, and I am not going anywhere if I can help it. But even if the worst happened, you are strong enough to survive it. You have proven that. And our child would be lucky to have you as a mother, with or without me." His words did not erase her fears, but they helped. As her pregnancy progressed, Rebecca found herself excited about the future in a way she had not been since before Thomas died. She imagined a child with Lucas's blue-green eyes, teaching them to ride, to work the land, to be strong and kind. Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1881. The labor was long and difficult, but when Rebecca finally held the squalling infant, she felt complete. Lucas cried when he held his son for the first time, this big, strong cowboy reduced to tears by a tiny baby. "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked. "I was thinking Thomas," Lucas said softly, "to honor the man who came before me. He was your husband, and he deserves to be remembered." "I am not trying to replace him, Rebecca. I am just trying to walk beside you as we move forward." Rebecca felt her heart swell with love for this man who understood her so completely. "Thomas Lucas Xavier," she said. "It is perfect." Little Tommy, as they called him, was a healthy, happy baby who grew into a curious toddler. The ranch prospered under their joint care, and by 1883 they had expanded their herd and improved the house. Lucas had left the Turner Ranch to work their own land full-time, and together they were building something substantial. Rebecca's relationship with Lucas deepened with each passing year. They were partners in every sense, sharing work and dreams and the raising of their son. Lucas proved every day that her heart was safe with him, through small kindnesses and grand gestures, through listening and understanding and never taking her for granted. In 1884, their daughter was born, a tiny girl with Rebecca's dark hair and Lucas's eyes. They named her Sarah Grace, and Tommy was instantly besotted with his baby sister. The house rang with children's laughter now, a sound Rebecca had once thought she would never hear. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and difficult winters, sick cattle and broken equipment. But Rebecca and Lucas faced each challenge together, their bond strengthening with each obstacle overcome. The ranch that Rebecca had almost lost became one of the most successful in the area, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Rebecca to the spot where he had first stopped to help her with her horse all those years ago. "I knew even then," he said, holding her hand as they looked out over the valley. "I knew you were special, that you were someone worth knowing. I am so grateful you let me prove myself to you, that you gave me the chance to love you." "I am grateful you were patient with me," Rebecca replied. "You taught me that not all men are the same, that love can be steady and safe and still be passionate. You gave me back my life, Lucas." "We gave each other our lives," Lucas corrected. "We built this together." As the years passed, their family grew. Another son came in 1887, then twin girls in 1890. The ranch expanded, requiring additional help. They hired hands carefully, treating them fairly and building a reputation as good employers. Tommy grew into a young man who loved the land as much as his parents did, learning everything Lucas could teach him about ranching and everything Rebecca could teach him about managing a business. Rebecca never forgot Thomas, and Lucas never asked her to. On the anniversary of his death each year, she visited his grave and told him about her life, about the children he would have loved. Lucas always came with her, standing quietly supportive while she remembered. By 1895, Rebecca was 40 years old and Lucas was 43. Their oldest, Tommy, was 14 and already doing a man's work on the ranch. Sarah was 11, and the younger children ranged from 8 to 5. The house was always full of noise and love and the chaos of a large family. One evening, after the children were in bed, Rebecca and Lucas sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and beautiful in the twilight. "You ever regret it?" Rebecca asked. "Taking on a widow with nothing, working so hard to earn my trust." Lucas looked at her with surprise. "Regret? Rebecca, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we built, these children, this ranch, they are everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed. Every day I spent proving myself to you was worth it 1,000 times over." "I was so difficult," Rebecca said with a small smile, "so suspicious and closed off. You were protecting yourself and you had every reason to, but you were also brave enough to let me in, to give love another chance. That took more courage than I can imagine." Rebecca leaned against him and Lucas wrapped his arm around her. "I love you," she said. "I will never stop loving you, and I love you, always and forever." As the stars came out, they sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who had found each other at the right time, who had built something beautiful from pain and loss and the courage to trust again. The years continued to roll by. The children grew, and eventually some left to make their own way in the world, though Tommy stayed to help run the ranch. He married a kind woman from San Andreas in 1899, and soon Rebecca and Lucas were grandparents. Their first grandchild, a girl named Rebecca after her grandmother, brought them immense joy. Sarah became a teacher, moving to Sacramento but visiting often. The younger children were still at home as the new century dawned, but they too would eventually find their own paths. Through it all, Rebecca and Lucas remained the center, the solid foundation upon which the family was built. In 1903, Rebecca looked at Lucas across the dinner table, surrounded by children and grandchildren who had come to visit, and marveled at the life they had created. This man, who had shown up in a snowstorm and refused to leave her to struggle alone, who had patiently and persistently proven that her heart was safe with him, had given her everything. That night, after everyone had gone to bed or headed home, Rebecca and Lucas walked out to look at their land under the moonlight. "We did well," Lucas said, his arm around her waist. "We did very well," Rebecca agreed. Better than I ever imagined. Do you remember when we first met? You were so determined to refuse my help. I thought you must want something from me. I did want something, Lucas said. I wanted to know you, to be near you, but I wanted you to want that too, freely, without obligation. You are a patient man, Lucas Xavier. You were worth the patience, Rebecca Xavier. They stood together in the moonlight, two people who had found their way through grief and fear to build a life of love and trust. The ranch that had nearly broken Rebecca now stood as a testament to their partnership, to the power of steady, everyday love that proved itself through action rather than words. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Rebecca thought about the scared, suspicious widow she had been and the woman she had become. Lucas had not changed her, but he had helped her heal, had shown her that trust could be rebuilt, that love could be safe and sure and lasting. Their story was not one of grand romantic gestures or dramatic declarations. It was a story of small, daily choices, of Lucas showing up again and again, of Rebecca letting him in piece by piece, of two people building something solid and true from the ruins of their pasts. In the end, that was more powerful than any fairy tale. It was real, and it was theirs, and it was everything. Years later, when Rebecca was old and gray, sitting on the porch of the ranch that had grown beyond her wildest dreams, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren, someone asked her the secret to a long, happy marriage. She thought of Lucas, who sat beside her still after all these years, his hand in hers as it had been for decades. Trust, she said simply. Not blind trust given freely, but trust earned through patience and proven through action. And finding someone who understands that your heart has been hurt before, who is willing to prove every single day that it is safe with them. That is love. Real, lasting love. Lucas squeezed her hand and she smiled at him, this man who had been her rock, her partner, her love for so many years. I would not change a single thing, she told him quietly. Neither would I, Lucas replied. Not one single thing. As the sun set over their ranch, painting the California sky in brilliant colors, Rebecca Barrett Xavier reflected on a life well lived, a love hard won but all the more precious for it. She had been a woman afraid to trust, and she had found a man patient enough to prove himself worthy. Together, they had built not just a ranch, but a legacy of love that would continue for generations. And in the end, that was everything.